Hi everyone, my name's Emma and I'm one of the clinical psychologists from our medical psychology department. Hopefully you'll have already seen information about our phone line and our website that you can access wellbeing strategies and resources on. Today I want to talk to you and offer some helpful hints and tips for something I think we've all struggled with at some point, and that's the difficulty of shutting off from work when we go home. We've all been there. You get home, you're cooking dinner, speaking to a loved one, trying to watch a good Netflix series, but actually inevitably your mind is just consumed with thoughts of work and you can't concentrate on that enjoyable thing you're trying to do. Or you have that sudden feeling of panic because you think you've forgotten to hand something over or to lock something away or whatever it be. And you have that urge to ring somebody and tell them about it and make sure that information's available to them. Whatever the situation, we've all experienced it at some point. And actually, the ability to shut off from work at home is probably even harder at the moment, because actually when we're in our homes, news of coronavirus is everywhere and everybody's talking about it. So we can't just leave the topic behind when we close that door and get in our cars at the end of the day. But also, some of the things that would usually help us to cope with the stress of work and the demands of work are maybe less accessible for us. So perhaps that day where something really difficult's happened and we've been maybe saddened or really moved by a situation, maybe that's the day that normally we'd come home and a hug from a loved one would be enough to help us just to transition into where we are right now. But we can't do that necessarily at the moment, or indeed it's much harder for people. Or perhaps if we had a stressful day, we'd go out for a meal with friends or go to the cinema. All of these things are things that we can't necessarily access at the moment. So we're having to maybe more consciously attend to our self-care and find new ways of looking after ourselves. And I'm hoping that some of the hints and tips that I can share with you in this video will help with making that transition and creating those boundaries. Because that's what it's all about. It's not about how much you're working or how important work is to you. The things that I'm sharing with you in this video are about managing that transition, creating a boundary between work and home, and supporting that transition and making it something that's easy to do. So going forward, we've divided this video into two parts. Part 1 contains the general hints and tips, and part 2 contains the everyday tips that you can use. So if you haven't got time to watch this entire video now, you can access these parts individually. Okay, so let's get started then with thinking about some hints and tips, some strategies that might help with maintaining those work-home boundaries and supporting that transition from work back home. Okay, so first things first, the very first thing that it's important to do is maybe focus on the basics, and that being our diet and our sleep. It sounds simple, but often at times of stress, they're the things that we tend to neglect, maybe even unconsciously, first. So taking some strategies to make sure that we get good nutrition, we eat throughout the day and we're drinking plenty, but also optimising the opportunity for us to have as good a night's sleep as is possible is really important. And you can find more information about sleep hygiene techniques from our website. Okay, so second hint and tip. Develop kinder expectations of yourself. It's likely that none of us will ever achieve the perfect balance. And how often have you set yourself an unrealistic expectation and then felt guilty because you haven't achieved it? Setting yourself kinder expectations, reminding yourself that you're doing your best, is probably really important to getting the best out of yourself at work and at home. Okay, so thirdly, be proactive and develop a self-care plan. This could be something as basic as noting some of your whys, why you do the work that you do, and what the things are that matter to you in life. And some of the basic strategies that you know help you to feel good and to stay feeling well. Having these as a physical reminder can be useful at times of stress to just go back to and gain some perspective and direction for what you might do next. But you can also develop more comprehensive self-care plans. And if you want some hints and tips about how to develop them, then there are some basic templates available on our website. Okay, number 4. Be flexible, but both ways. Sometimes, of course, there has to be a bit of give. Sometimes it's absolutely going to feel the right thing to do to stay late or to do some work outside of your usual working hours. Sometimes there may be actually very little choice in that. But when you're allowing some give or some flexibility in one part of the system, be sure to try and take that back at a time when the demand is less. Okay, number 5. Encourage and engage in discussion with colleagues about work-home boundaries. A really good example of this for me is about things like WhatsApp groups, for example. WhatsApp groups are great for helping us to connect with colleagues in a really quick, accessible way. But actually, it might be important to have a discussion about the boundaries of those groups and the expectations of engaging in those groups. So it would be all too easy for when you're on your days off to be checking those WhatsApp groups, maybe due to a fear of missing out, or indeed worrying that actually important information is going to be shared that you need to prepare for when you next come back into work. So it can be really helpful wherever possible to have some open discussions about what the purpose of that group is for and what the boundaries are to it. So perhaps it's helpful to set actually an expectation that no crucial information would be shared on that group. So on your days off, you can mute that group and choose not to look at it, safe in the knowledge that you're not going to miss out on information that you need for your next shift. Okay, so hint and tip number 6 is to find mastery in something that is not work. It doesn't matter what it is, but something ideally that consumes you for a small amount of time that really needs to take your attention. So it might be playing an instrument, it might be cooking or baking, it might be a sporting interest that you have, but ideally something that really needs you to focus and requires some attention. And it's amazing that even half an hour of an exercise like that can really change our energy. But also the feedback we get from doing something, achieving something, is really good for our well-being too. So yeah, find something that you enjoy, find something that you are kind of good at, and do it as often as you can. Okay, so number 7. Try to notice your blind spots and practice doing something differently. So maybe you're the person who knows that you struggle to say no. Maybe you're the person that struggles with delegating. Whatever it be, just simply noticing that and being aware of that could be helpful. And maybe in one situation, just practice doing something differently. Try doing the opposite to that, and see how you find that. It can be quite liberating. Okay, so the last bit of advice in this video is actually a piece of advice that I've heard commonly talked about and is probably the most helpful bit of advice that I've ever been given myself, and that is to plan ahead for regular rest and recharge opportunities. So planning annual leave in advance and planning nice things to look forward to so that you always have that pause and opportunity to come back to your work with increased energy and feeling revitalised. It's all too easy at times when things are really busy at work that suddenly we get on that work train and we realise that we've gone 2 months without having an extra day off or using any annual leave or worse, several months. And that's really natural. So planning ahead and setting time that we will do things that are just about resting, recharging and connecting with the things that matter is really valuable. Okay, so let's just summarise those general hints and tips before we move on to part 2. Number 1, getting the basics right. Number 2, developing kinder expectations of ourselves. Number 3, developing a self-care plan proactively. Number 4, being flexible but both ways. Number 5, engaging in discussions with colleagues about ways of maintaining work-home boundaries. Number 6, getting a sense of mastery in something that's not work. Number 7, being aware of our blind spots and maybe looking for exits from them. And number 8, planning ahead for opportunities for time away from work to rest and recharge. Okay, so that's part 1, our general hints and tips for leaving work behind complete. If you've got time, stay here and we're going to talk about some specific daily strategies that you can use. Or alternatively, you can come back to this at a later point by accessing the part 2 video. Okay, so part 2 is about some specific strategies that you can use actually most days. I guess the way I would think about them are like habits that we can maybe get into, useful habits that can help to maintain that work-home boundary and just ease and give the best opportunity for that transition from work to home. Okay, so the first strategy is to use lists. So firstly, at the end of the day, make a list, whether that be a physical list, ideally, or a mental list of all the things that you've actually achieved that day, no matter how small. And secondly, make a list of the things that are left to come back to. Wherever possible, do this physically, whether in type or whether in writing, because the actual physical effort of writing down and noting the things you've achieved maybe helps to reinforce that. But also knowing that those things are physically, tangibly, those things that are left to do and remain undone are physically written down can help to give you permission when your mind inevitably wanders later on in the day to let those thoughts go, safe in the knowledge that those things are physically written down or typed down somewhere. They're not going to be lost. You can come back to them. Okay, number 2, develop your own internal personal assistant and use external aids to help you with this. So whether it be colour coding your Microsoft Outlook diary, whether it be using a Filofax or a to-do list, whatever the strategy, find a way of storing work-related tasks other than just in your head. Again, to give yourself permission to let those thoughts go at a later time. Okay, number 3. Protect some time at the end of each working day for some brief reflection. So this might be before you leave your office space or the ward, or it might be 10 minutes in your car before you set off for home. The NHS checklist, which you can see on the screen, can be a useful tool for promoting this. Just as simple as 5 minutes even, to reflect on the achievements of that day, the things that have gone well, but also to acknowledge any challenges of the day, can be really useful for helping that transition from work to home. Okay, number 4, create rituals that mark the transition from work to home. We use rituals to mark transitions in all parts of life. So we brush our teeth before we go to bed. We wash the pots at the end of a meal. All of these very small acts mark a transition from one phase to the next. And actually, having some small rituals that help to mark the transition from work to home can help us with making that transition and leaving the working day behind. So it might be as simple as, rather than just Control-Alt-Delete and shutting your screen, actually shutting down the boxes on your computer and logging off for the day and turning that computer off. Maybe just spending a brief few moments tidying your desk, making sure things are away and that things look contained might be helpful. Changing out of work clothes into leisure clothes, home clothes, and whatever you might call them, can also be symbolic in that way. Leaving items behind that actually are related to work and that don't really need to come home with us can be useful too. So just small things that can help to mark that transition and leave work behind and transition to our home. Number 5, make use of the walk to your transport home or the commute itself. So a useful tip from mindful.org from Alicia Goldstein is a helpful mindfulness technique. So as you walk to your car, slow down, check in with your body and notice any tension, and just try and soften it. Another useful way of making the most of the commute comes from Brantley and Milstein's 5 Good Minutes at Work book. They suggest using the commute as an opportunity for some mindfulness. So approach your commute as if you are a tourist exploring that commute for the first time. Take in all that is around you. Notice the sights that you can see curiously, as if seeing them for the first time. Notice the sounds. Notice the smells. All that is around you as you make that commute home. Just mindfully engaging in that present moment, observing your scenery and all its details as if it's the first time you've taken that journey. If it's a long commute, why not take the opportunity to connect with another part of yourself, maybe by listening to a favourite podcast or a favourite piece of music that helps you to unwind. Okay, the next hint and tip is to connect with nature. So if you travel home by car or by bus, it can be really easy to feel that you go from one building into another enclosed space, back into another building. And actually, just 5 minutes, a walk around the block, perhaps when we get out of the car before we go into the house, a walk around the car park and the surrounding area of the hospital, indeed, before we get back into the car to go home, or just 5 minutes in the garden before we go about our tasks for that evening. Just a moment connecting with nature can really change our energy and help manage that transition. Exercise when you can is tip number 7. We all know, but actually it can change our energy instantly and can do so much for our emotional well-being. Okay, so lastly, but certainly not least, if your mind wanders to work, give yourself permission to let that thought go. Typically, we maybe tend to do one of two things when our mind wanders to work, when we're at home. Maybe we beat ourselves up thinking, oh, if only I could cut off from these work thoughts. It's getting in the way, how annoying. We feel irritated at ourselves. So we spend time trying to just shut it out, block it out. Or maybe conversely, actually we get really hooked by those thoughts and we try and problem solve our way out of them. Either way, inevitably, we end up hooked and spending time with those work thoughts. And sometimes there isn't a solution. Sometimes things at work will remain undone, probably more likely than not. There's always work to come back to. So sometimes we just can't find a solution or a way out of that thought. And perhaps what we need to do is change our relationship with those thoughts. Rather than struggle with them by trying to shut them out or problem solving, maybe just a mindful acceptance of that thought showing up, a simple noticing that that thought's arrived and allowing that thought to pass. There are some useful mindfulness strategies that can help us with this. Brantley and Millstone suggest the following in their 5 Good Minutes at Work. So let me talk you through this strategy. If you notice a work thought popping into your mind, just gently acknowledge your thought and say something like, "The thoughts about work are here right now." For about a minute, just close your eyes and breathe, or listen to the sounds around you mindfully. Notice if there are deeper feelings present in your thoughts. Maybe you're feeling upset, excited, or angry. Name these feelings and let them be as you keep breathing or listening mindfully. As you name each feeling, speak kindly to it. You might say, "I release you," or "Thank you, but not now." And conclude the practice by focusing on your breath or surrounding sounds. Slowly open your eyes and move gently. Another strategy that Brantley and Millstone suggest is a visualization strategy. Try imagining that you're a spool of thread that unravels from job-related stress. Connect to your breath for 1 minute and focus on the present. And with the first rotation of your spool of thread, you're unwinding your tiresome list of worries. You're freeing yourself from their grip on your life. On the second spin of the spool, you're unravelling your burdensome thoughts about what you've left undone at work. Tomorrow you'll have a chance to get to it, but for now, there's no room for work. Okay, so we're almost at the end now, but the final thing that I would like to say is to not put off fun. We've all done it. We felt too tired to have that phone call with friends or to return to that activity that we enjoy doing. But actually, a little bit of fun, even in a small dose, can create a really big change in our energy. And you deserve fun. So don't put it off. Do the thing that makes you happy. Do the thing that you enjoy, no matter how brief the amount of time for. Okay, so let's just finish by summarising those hints and tips. Number 1, use lists. Lists of things you've finished and lists of things that remain undone. Number 2, develop your own personal assistant system. Number 3, take time for some brief reflection at the end of each day. Number 4, use mini rituals to mark that transition from work to home. Number 5, make use of the commute. Number 6, connect with nature. And number 7, get exercise whenever you can. And number 8, use mindfulness to let thoughts of work go. And last but not least, number 9, take opportunities for fun when they arise. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this video. I hope something from what we've talked about will be useful for you. But if you remember maybe just one thing, remember that hint and tip about creating kinder expectations for yourself. This video isn't designed for you to shake up your entire working routine or work-home balance. Actually, if there's just one thing, just one simple thing that you hear in this video that you can do that maybe can become a habit for life, then maybe that's enough. Thank you so much for listening to the video. If you do want any more information on some of the hints and tips that have been shared, there's lots of useful advice on our website, or you can also access further advice by calling our phone line. Stay safe and well, and thank you again.